The afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows of Government Secondary School, casting a warm glow across the classroom. Chidi sat quietly in his seat, his eyes focused on Miss Vivian, the English literature teacher who always made learning feel like an exciting adventure. Her voice was gentle but powerful as she discussed the importance of expressing feelings through writing. Chidi had always been a thoughtful student, more comfortable listening than speaking. Today's assignment was different. Write about a moment that meant something special. While other students seemed unsure, Chidi's pencil moved smoothly across his paper. He thought about his grandmother, the most important person in his life, who had taught him so much about kindness and dreams. When Miss Vivian asked if anyone wanted to share their writing, Chidi felt a mix of nervousness and excitement. His friends Emeka and Tund exchanged knowing looks. They knew Chidi was an excellent student who always took assignments seriously. With a deep breath, Chidi stood up and began to read his essay about his grandmother's wisdom and love. As Chidi spoke about his grandmother's gentle guidance and inspiring words, the classroom became completely quiet. He described how she would sit with him after school, sharing stories about life, teaching him to be brave and kind. Miss Vivian listened carefully, touched by the young student's heartfelt words. Her eyes showed how much she appreciated the deep emotions in his writing. After Chidi finished, there was a moment of silence. "Thank you, Chidi," Miss Vivian said with a warm smile. "You've shown us the true power of storytelling." Chidi felt a sense of accomplishment, happy that he could share something so personal and meaningful. As the school bell rang, he realized that sometimes the most important lessons come from sharing our true feelings and listening to others. Days after his heartfelt essay, Chidi found himself struggling to concentrate in class. Miss Vivian's lessons, once a source of inspiration, now felt like a complicated maze of emotions he couldn't understand. Every time she walked past his desk, he would quickly look down, his heart racing with a mixture of admiration and confusion that he couldn't explain to himself. Emeka and Tun noticed their friends' changing behavior. During lunch break, they watched as Chidi deliberately chose a seat far from Miss Vivian's usual spot in the staff section of the school dining hall. "Is everything okay?" Emeka asked, breaking a piece of bread and sharing it with Tund. Chidi mumbled something about feeling unwell, but his friends knew there was more to the story. They had seen the way he looked at Miss Vivian during the essay presentation, a look that was more than just student respect. Miss Vivian began to worry about Chidi's sudden withdrawal. He had been an engaged student who always participated enthusiastically in class discussions. Now, he seemed distant, avoiding eye contact and sitting at the back of the classroom. During one literature session, she noticed. He was staring out the window, his notebook untouched. "Chidi," she called gently, "would you like to share your thoughts on the poem we just read?" But Chidi merely shook his head, his cheeks turning a soft shade of red. The school counselor, Mr. Okonkwo, noticed the change in Chidi's behavior during their weekly student check-in. "Sometimes," he told Chidi, "growing up means learning to understand our feelings. It's okay to feel confused." Chidi listened silently, grateful that no one was pushing him to explain the jumble of emotions inside him. He respected Miss Vivian deeply, not just as a teacher, but as someone who seemed to understand the power of words and emotions in a way few others did. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to give this video a like, click the subscribe button down below. While you're there, turn on the bell notification to get notified whenever I drop a new video. As weeks passed, Chidi's internal struggle continued. He knew his feelings were complicated and potentially inappropriate. Miss Vivian was his teacher, someone who had been nothing but kind and supportive. Yet, he couldn't shake the deep connection he felt, the sense that she saw something special in him that no one else had ever recognized before. Little did Chidi know that his journey of understanding himself was just beginning, and the challenges ahead would test everything he thought he knew about respect, emotions, and growing up. The school corridors buzzed with afternoon energy as students prepared to head home. Miss Vivian noticed Chidi lingering behind, his backpack hanging loosely from one shoulder. She could tell something was troubling him. With a gentle smile, she approached him after the last class. "Chidi," she said softly, "can we talk for a moment?" Chidi's heart started beating fast. He knew he had been avoiding her for weeks, and now he would have to explain why. Mr. Okonkwo's words from their counseling session echoed in his mind. It's okay to feel confused.
But Chidi didn't feel okay.
He felt like a jumble of emotions that he couldn't understand or control. Miss Vivian's kindness made everything more complicated. "Is everything all right?" Miss Vivian asked, her voice full of concern. She could see Chidi was struggling. He had always been an excellent student, thoughtful, intelligent, and deeply passionate about learning. Now, he looked like a young person carrying a heavy secret. "You've been quiet in class," she continued. "I'm worried about you." Chidi looked down at his shoes, unable to meet her eyes. Then he tried to kiss her, saying that he had developed feelings for her, which she quietly pushed him away in order not to complicate the situation. The next day, the empty classroom felt warm and quiet. Sunlight streamed through the windows, creating long shadows on the floor. Chidi knew he needed to say something, anything. But how could he explain feelings he didn't even understand himself? Miss Vivian waited, patiently giving him space to speak. She had always been a teacher who believed in listening, truly listening to her students. Finally, Chidi looked up. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I didn't mean to cause any trouble." Miss Vivian's expression softened. She understood that growing up meant learning to navigate complicated emotions. "Everyone feels confused sometimes," she said kindly. "What matters is that we learn from our feelings and treat each other with respect." In that moment, something shifted between them, an understanding that went beyond words, a connection that neither of them could fully explain. Chidi realized that respect and admiration could take many forms, and learning to understand those feelings was part of growing up. The days following their conversation became complicated for Chidi. He tried to return normal, but something had changed. His friends Emeka and Tund watched him carefully, sensing the weight of unspoken emotions. During lunch breaks, they would catch him staring into space, his mind clearly somewhere else. "We're worried about you," Emeka said. Tund nodded in agreement. They could see their friend was struggling with something big, something he wasn't ready to share. Chidi appreciated their concern but felt more alone than ever. How could he explain feelings he didn't fully understand himself? The school counselor, Mr. Okonkwo, had been watching Chidi too. During their next meeting, he spoke gently about growing up, about understanding emotions, and about the importance of respect. "Feelings can be complicated," he told Chidi. "But what matters most is how we handle them." Chidi listened carefully. Mike, one of Chidi's classmates who had been watching the strange interactions between Chidi and Miss Vivian, decided to take matters into his own hands. The assembly hall was packed with students and teachers, creating the perfect stage for what was about to unfold. Mike stood up suddenly, his voice cutting through the morning announcements. "Something is happening between Chidi and Miss Vivian," he shouted, pointing dramatically across the hall. The room fell silent, hundreds of eyes turning toward Chidi and Miss Vivian. Chidi felt his face burning with embarrassment, his heart racing so fast he thought it might burst. Miss Vivian looked shocked, her professional composure momentarily shaken. Principal Adewale immediately stepped forward, his stern voice demanding explanation. "What is the meaning of this?" he asked, looking between Mike, Chidi, and Miss Vivian. Miss Vivian remained calm, understanding the delicate situation. She knew her reputation as a teacher was on the line. "This is a misunderstanding," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. But Mike continued, sharing fragments of what he had observed. Chidi's changed behavior. The way he looked at Miss Vivian, the tension between them that seemed different from a normal student-teacher relationship. The assembly dissolved into chaos. Students were talking, pointing, and speculating. Principal Adewale called for silence, but the damage was already done. Chidi sat frozen, unable to move or speak. He knew his life would never be the same after this moment. Miss Vivian caught his eye briefly, not with anger, but with a look of understanding and compassion. Principal Adewale explained that Chidi would be suspended pending a thorough investigation. Miss Vivian remained silent, her eyes showing a mix of disappointment and concern. At home, Chidi's family was devastated. His mother cried, wondering how her once perfect son could be involved in such a serious situation. His father sat quietly, trying to understand what had happened. Chidi felt worse about disappointing his family than anything else. He knew his actions, whatever they were, had hurt the people who loved and trusted him most. The next few days were the longest of Chidi's life. He was suspended from school, cut off from his friends and his favorite teacher. Mr. Okonkwo, the school counselor, visited him at home. Growing up means making mistakes, he told Chidi. But it also means learning from them and becoming a better person. Chidi listened carefully, understanding that his journey was about more than just this one moment. As days passed, the initial shock began to fade. Chidi reflected on his feelings on respect and on the importance of understanding boundaries. He realized that admiration and respect could take many forms, but they must always be balanced with proper behavior. Miss Vivian's kindness had touched his heart, but he now understood the importance of maintaining appropriate relationships. His path forward would be about learning, growing, and becoming a better version of himself. Weeks after the incident, Chidi returned to government secondary school. The hallways felt different, filled with whispers and cautious glances. Principal Adewale had arranged for Chidi to return under strict supervision, ensuring he would have the support he needed to move forward. Miss Vivian continued teaching, her professional demeanor unchanged. She understood that young people sometimes struggled with complicated emotions. During class, she treated Chidi like any other student, with respect, but without special attention. Chidi appreciated her approach, recognizing the wisdom in maintaining clear boundaries. Emeka and Tund stood by their friend. They didn't ask too many questions, but made sure Chidi knew he wasn't alone. Mr. Okonkwo continued their counseling sessions, helping Chidi understand the importance of emotional intelligence and respecting professional relationships. Feelings are normal, he would say, but how we handle them defines our character. The school slowly returned to normal. Mike, who had caused the initial disruption, was reminded about the importance of kindness. Chidi focused on his studies, channeling his energy into writing and learning. He realized that his admiration for Miss Vivian had been a complicated mix of respect, inspiration, and the natural confusion of growing up. As the school year progressed, Chidi learned valuable lessons about relationships, boundaries, and personal growth. He understood that true respect meant understanding and controlling one's emotions. Miss Vivian remained an inspiration, not as a romantic interest, but as a teacher who had helped him understand himself better. His journey of self-discovery continued, filled with hope and the promise of learning.